Welcome to another episode of On the Issues with Alon Ben-Meir. Today's guest is Hafza Girdap, spokesperson for Advocates of Silence Turkey and an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology, Criminology and Anthropology at Hofstra University. In this episode, Alon and Hafza discuss the 10 years since the attempted coup in Turkey in 2016, the countless human rights violations committed by the Erdogan government since then, and the status of women's rights and minority rights in Turkey.
Hello, Hafsa. I want to, first of all, take this opportunity to thank you really for taking the time to speak about this very, very important subject related to the treatment of especially of women in Turkey. I would like you to first to give us just an overall view. I know you wrote a very important paper, which I read recently, about the ill treatment of young people, specifically young women in Turkey. How do you see that unfolding given the current environment that exists today in the region and in Turkey in particular?
First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity for me to share all the atrocities and human rights abuses in Turkey, because as just Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So I would like to thank again for the opportunity.
My pleasure.
So I'm Hafza Girdap. I am the spokesperson and program director at AST, Advocates of Silence Turkey, and I'm also assistant professor at Hofstra University here in New York. 2026, it's a very important, time for whole world, but for Turkey in particular, because it's 2026 marks the 10th year of the July 15 failed coup, and then unfortunately the government of Turkey, aka Erdogan regime, continues systemic and far-reaching human rights violations and atrocities. Actually, what initially began as so-called emergency measures in the aftermath of the coup attempt turn into a sustained practice of repression, oppression, and persecution, and that has actually reshaped the legal system, social institutions, society, and everyday life. Following 2014, earlier on initially, and then especially after the July 15, 2016 coup attempt, counterterrorism legislation was systematically weaponized as a tool of repression and tool of mass persecution and prosecution. Broad and vague charges, specifically membership under the guise of membership in an armed organization, enable the criminalization of peaceful activities, social relationships, and ordinary civil life practices. And millions were investigated, have still been investigated. Hundreds of thousands of people have been imprisoned, and the operations are still ongoing. And entire sectors such as media, education, civil society, healthcare, they have been dismantled through emergency decrees. Speaking of these, mass prosecutions, I wanna highlight some numbers here. Almost 4 million people have been investigated. This is huge. And again, almost 1 million people, individuals, have been jailed. And as I said, operations are still ongoing. People are still being, jailed and, taken into custody. So it shows that these, consequences of such a huge purge, witch hunt, extend far beyond courtrooms. Because there is the plights of prisons right now, overcrowded prisons, prolonged pretrial detentions, torture, ill treatment, even prosecution of children, and denial of health care to sick and elderly prisoners, preventable deaths, media repression, and political purges have collectively eroded the rule of law, judicial system. And unfortunately, international bodies, including the European Court of Human Rights, United Nations systems, entities, they have confirmed that these violations are widespread and systematic. And to wrap it up as a general picture of democratic backslide in Turkey, the economic and social costs have been equally severe. Currency collapse, inflation, unemployment, mass unemployment, forced migrations, especially between 2016 and today, and also profound family breakdowns. Divorce rates among individuals subjected to emergency decrees significantly exceed the national average, and law that should be a safeguard of rights has been transformed into an instrument of control. There are dismissals, and these people who have been dismissed are having problems with access. Let me talk about myself as a case, for example.
Yeah, before you start you do that, because I want to just a couple of questions about what you just have said. It is not uncommon, needless to say, that
Yeah.
authoritarian regime abuse, disabuse, people. They're basically they're people, they're citizens, for a variety of reasons, to consolidate power, to achieve various nefarious goals that they have in mind. So it is not a strange phenomena for this to happen in Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
But I've studied Erdogan and I know his background and I know from the time he rose to power more than 20 plus years ago. And initially he started major reforms. He
Yeah.
almost doubled, tripled the GMP within the next 6 years. I mean, everyone been calling him, he's a reformer, and he has done, by all accounts, he's done exceptionally well until the so-called coup of July
Mm-hmm.
2016, and there was a major flip.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the question that I have for you now, for somebody who wants to be remembered as a popular, as one who almost we want to resurrect the power, the influence, the prestige of the Ottoman Empire, why would he resort? Why would he resort to the various measures that he has taken against so many people, against the Gulenist movement, which he continued to prosecute, against the Kurds, which he continued to persecute, and of course now what you are mentioning against his own, not Kurds necessarily, not followers of the Gulen movement, but young people, especially women,
Mm-hmm.
to the degree that he is doing that. Why do you think he is doing so? What are his motivation? What is he trying to achieve by that?
So actually, this is a $1 million question, I guess, Alan, because everybody is asking the same question. Has he always been like this since the very beginning, or is it kind of poison of power or something? Considering all options altogether, unfortunately, it's not started, with Erdogan. You said that you are following Turkey, closely. The regimes in the historical context of Turkey, in terms of regimes, they have always been repressive. They have always been nationalist, discriminatory, patriarchal. Using the intersection of religion, ethnicity, nationality to construct, exclusionary citizenship regime. And always the Sunni Turkish heteronormativity has always been the privilege as the foundation of belonging, while minorities Kurdish, Armenian, Alawi, secular, feminist, LGBTQ, there have always been these marginalized people. What is now I don't want to say, surprising, but somehow different than the previous regimes. A current regime right now is using a narrative which has already also been selectively mobilized to legitimize repression, and the selectiveness is coming through religion right now, a religious narrative. This is interesting. This is a kind of paradoxical, ironical situation, because Erdogan is claiming to be a religious, proper, pious Islamic leader, and also is oppressing, persecuting, hunting Sunni people, religious people, which is, so-called his own people. This is very different than the previous regimes, and it's also, surprising, shocking in some sense. And I think using this religious narrative, the victimhood discourse that pious people, conservative people, religious practicing people have always been, marginalized in the historical context of Turkey since the foundation of Turkish Republic. Now Erdogan, as an Islamist leader, is framing his power, his laws, his state through these religious discourses. But as a hijabi woman, and when you consider the people who are imprisoned right now, these are Sunni people, practicing people, bringing the question, why? What's the motive behind it? I want to say that just, covering up corruption and also other international, crimes that the state of Turkey, especially Erdogan's close circle, is conducting.
Yeah,
So,
let me ask you this because I'm aware that Turkey, going back many decades even before Erdogan came to power, basically also conducted the similar kind of approach to its population. There's no doubt about it. But when Erdogan rose to power, until 2016, he was, as I said earlier, was a reformer. In fact, reformer, social, economic reform, in just about every field of endeavor, he was a reformer. So that's why I'm saying it. The switch came after the so-called coup. I personally don't believe that this coup was a legitimate one. I think it probably was concocted, as far as I'm concerned.
yeah.
But he made that turn. And of course, and you're absolutely right to mention the role of Islam, which I want to touch on that a little later. But we're trying to analyze that particular switch. In particular, Turkey is a NATO member state.
Yeah.
And a member state required by the NATO Charter to adhere to a democratic form of government, to equal rights, all of the charter that's required from a democracy to be, as a member state, has to be a democracy adhering to all democratic norms and behavior. Well, obviously, Erdogan is not doing so, and the member NATO states, particularly the United States, even European leading countries, are not saying or much about it. He's basically letting him do whatever, pretty much what he wants to do. What again? So the question is here twofold. One, why did he make that kind of U-turn after 2016? What it is from your perspective, was the EU is basically not putting his foot down and say this is not acceptable, because as a NATO member state, you cannot do so, albeit there are no provision within NATO to kick out a member state, and that is of course unfortunate. What do you say on that?
I mean, I think personally, the answer is so simple. The geopolitical, position of Turkey is very, impactful in that sense, because when you consider millions of refugees in Turkey right now, Erdogan is using them as a, card to play with. When it comes to some European sanctions or some warnings in terms of human rights or democracy issues, Erdogan explicitly, right in front of the cameras, says that just don't annoy me. I would open the doors, I would open the borders, and release all these refugees, which means more than 2 million Syrian refugees, or really great amount of refugees from Afghanistan or from other countries. If he would release these refugees, it means that they are gonna go to Europe, and now the right wing and also left wing populist regimes and they rise in Europe. When you consider all these components all together, nobody wants them, and they have to abide by Erdogan's approach into this issue. And when it comes to NATO, again, Turkey has a very impactful, significant, vital location space, just in between of all, powerful proxies there, Russia, China, Iran, and considering the airbase in Turkey, NATO's airbase, considering the relationships and all the routes to Israel or other Middle Eastern countries, intersecting with Turkey's geopolitical location, Erdogan has a very powerful card to play with against international powers.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no question about it. Turkey does occupy that geostrategic, importance for NATO member state, and this is one of the reason. One of the reason, in fact, they are not putting the kind of pressure they should put on him to
No.
change his way.
And on top of,
But
I'm
when
so
it
sorry
comes,
for interrupting, but that, the most recent thing on top of all these, already existing
yeah, yeah,
situations, Syria right now. I mean, Turkey has a very impactful position right now, as a leverage.
yeah, this is true. I just want to touch on the his initially, before the rise of Shara in Syria, and before the overthrow of the Assad regime. Turkey was able to use the refugees, the Syrian refugees, as a card against the Europeans, and say, well, if you do not do the A, B, C, or D, well, I'm going to allow these refugees to come to your country and flood your countries with Syrian refugees. That said, since Shara came to power, nearly 450,000 Syrian refugees went back to Syria, and the flow of Syrian refugees now continuously going back to Syria. So he is somewhat losing this card, using the threatening to use the refugees in order to extort the kind of concession he wants from the EU member state. So I'm not sure he is. That does not diminish, of course, the importance of Turkey geostrategically.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, but this one card, he's no longer able to use it as aggressively as he was able to use it in the past. What's your thought on that?
I mean, I wouldn't agree on that with all due respect, because when we say Syrian refugees, they are not a homogenized group. There are different, wide, diverse, ethnicities back there, uh, Alevi Syrian people, coming from there, or, Kurdish people with these ethnicities. They don't want to go back. They are, being, persecuted back there by the current, uh, transition government in Syria. If you follow the news there, villages are being raided, people are being attacked. So with Shara, I wouldn't say that refugees, not all refugees will, want to go back to Syria. So Erdogan still has the card.
Yeah, I mean, I know. Look, I know there's no question. Not every single Syrian would like to go back, but some consensus, some being taken now among the refugees. Very recently, like a couple of months ago, majority actually say, they would love to go back, and albeit they would like to go back and not go into another, political combustion in Syria itself, but they want to be able to live a normal life. And they are, and the signs are now that al-Shara is doing everything he can, even in connection with the Syrian Kurds, is trying to get them to all join together in order to create a country, unified country, rather than the way it used to be under the Assad regime. But I want to leave this for a moment and focus a little bit on what you are been talking about and advocating in connection with how the current government of Erdogan is treating and dealing with women in particular. I'd like you, first of all, to make some observation about that and ask you some question in connection with that. Good. I want you to, so, because,
I understood
yeah,
that
yeah,
you wanna
yeah,
let me
because
answer.
you wrote an important paper about that. And I'd like you to
Yes.
speak a little about how Erdogan is treating women
Mhm.
in Turkey, and because you wrote a very important paper, I'd like you to talk a little bit about your paper, and I'll have some question to ask you about in
Okay.
that regard. Yes,
Okay, please, yeah.
yeah,
Which
go ahead.
paper? I wrote
That
it.
you wrote about the women, about
Yeah.
how Erdogan is treating women, young women in Turkey at the
Oh,
present
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
Yes,
So, I want to get, I want to take it from the broader picture to the narrower picture, if I
yes,
may. So as I mentioned earlier, in the historical context of Turkey, since the foundation of Turkish Republic, women's issues have always been shaped by these, shifting political projects. With the secular regimes, the practicing pious people, women have been discriminated through hijab, through other, political participation and so forth. And with the Islamist populism right now, secularity or other, tools are being weaponized right now to restrict women in their own domains. So, across all regimes, women have always been symbolically, systematically instrumentalized. And with the AKP, although AKP, as just you mentioned, in the very beginning, let me say maybe the very first 7, 8 years, it seemed to be in line with, the European
Yes.
succession accession process and all other democratization and other, periods. But with the consolidation of power with the referendum in 2010, things started to shift.
Right.
Yeah, because they got the power, they got the support from the base right now to further their own already existing agenda, and an authoritarian shift as a regime change has started, and it got peak in 2013-14 with the corruption investigations against the government representatives. Since then, with all other democratic backslide, gender-based repression has intensified, peaking its point at 2016, disproportionately affecting dissident women, already persecuted women, Kurdish women, now Sunni women, which are predominantly affiliated with Hizmet movement, allegedly. They have been imprisoned while pregnant or in postpartum period or with infants. And exile has forced many into dangerous, migration routes, with tragic consequences, even, life loss. And, so this gender oppression intersecting with ethnic and religious marginalization narratives are started to, target society in terms of, I want to mention a very, interesting case here, which is very
Yes.
ugly, disgusting. A religious leader, elite, said that once these, meaning that the imprisoned or targeted members or affiliated, people of Gulen movement, their wives are now spoils of war. You can take them. Their girls, you can take them. This is actually very dangerous, giving somehow legitimization of repression and rape even, or, enslaving of women there, kind of, legitimizing them as a religious, practice because they are spoiled so forth. This is dangerous, Alon. And it's not, only that. There are a lot of stigmatizations, going around these women. And, coming to a very recent case, girls' case or minors' case, which drew a very international global attention to that. More than 40 individuals, including minors, particularly, were taken into custody, arrested, investigated, and this is a structural abuse of terrorism charges. They have been accused of being a terrorist, which is not possible because these kids, these young people were maybe 9 years old or 10 years old when the coup happened. Now they are young people, college students, high school students. How come they can be terrorists? And 19 individuals were acquitted, by 19 individuals were imprisoned and convicted with these finalized decisions. It's been appealed, but it's still an ongoing process right now. And the reason, the motives or the accusations behind these convictions were these activities, these religious activities, organizing iftar gatherings, reading Quran, dining together, going to bowling, studying together. These were the, I have a friend here, and Andrea Barron from the Torture Victim Support Organization in DC. She was there as an international observant, and she always, expresses her shock with the, questions of the judge in the court. Questions were not about guns or, terrorist activities. Questions were about these daily practices. So it shows how this, this is a political act. How laws are being weaponized to target even, young people, young girls. And there were serious procedural violations, taken place in that case. Unlawful surveillance, restrictions on defense rights, forced courtroom appearances, threats against, they were threatening these young people with their parents. And these are all, evidenced by the lawyers of these, young people. So these developments actually have deepened already existing concerns. And one case that I want to highlight here, that one of the girls, one of the young people's father, who's also imprisoned that time, just had a heart attack in prison and died. So this is not a single unique case. There are other, examples about, such like this case. So it's showing that this is a part of a broader pattern. Again, coming back to gender-based rights here, I want to say that, Turkey right now, as of 2025, ranks 135th in terms of the global gender gap index.
That's right. Yeah, very much
This is
backwards.
this
That's
is very
absolutely.
saddening,
Yeah.
concerning.
Now,
So
now
yeah,
yeah. So what you're painting, of course, the picture is exactly. It's sad. It's tragic. Um, what's happening? The young people, and I, been in touch with so many. They are saying, of course, they're hopeless. They don't feel that the change is going to occur anytime soon. They don't know, of course, who is going to succeed necessarily. There's no apparent successor to Erdogan now still. And so many of them are choosing, rather than struggling inside, when they have an opportunity, they are immigrating
yeah,
from Turkey. Now, how is the process? Is it easy for them to immigrate? Where are they usually going? And what is the impact? Because I know one thing, the impact on Turkey itself. I mean, you have not quite a brain drain taking place, but certainly many of these young people, I understand more than 400,000 left Turkey in the last 10, 7, 8 years alone. Um, what is it? Is it direct? Do you discern social economic impact as a result of the fact that many of these young, generally speaking, they're educated college graduates, are leaving Turkey, seeking out opportunities elsewhere in Europe or whatever country they'll be able to accept them?
yeah, because when you consider that, very recently in December, last December, European Court of Human Rights just issued rulings covering 2,420 applications in cases against Turkey, and they found, several violations of Article 7 and Article 9. They are about no punishment without law, because these accusations are not in law as crimes. And the other one is the violation of a right to a fair trial. Trials, courts are not right now really lawful. So in this atmosphere, in this environment, especially young people, of course, they don't have hope for the future. And when they are targeted and stigmatized, such as this girl's case, minor's case, they are labeled. For them to be able to work somewhere, to go to a college or university, and even to get a scholarship, they just are losing their opportunities. They are labeled. There is no chance to survive them in such an environment. They want to go leave the country, but in many cases, passports are canceled, seized. So
Hmm.
they need to go through the illegal,
Right.
ways, and this is dangerous. This is expensive. and it's illegal, at one point. And even if their passports are not seized, most of their parents are imprisoned. They don't want to leave them because somebody should take care of them. Somebody should should be in charge of other people outside the prisons, or they don't have the financial means. Again, as I said, it's not easy to go leave the country and start from scratch. I know by experience. It's not easy. It takes years. It takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of mental health. So yeah, some leaves, but some still should stay
You
even if
know,
they don't want.
yeah, what is puzzling to me is that all of this has been happening, but there were no major public protests in
Oh,
Turkey. Now the question, I've been looking into that. I mean, for example, you go to even countries like, say, Israel, or here in the United States, elsewhere, the so-called, democracies. Like Turkey, presumably it's a democracy still, which is obviously is anything but democracy. But the public seem to be either afraid, complacent, or a combination of the two, and there is no public resistance.
yeah.
There's no outpouring people in the street and saying, "We will not take it anymore." Why do you think there is this kind of public, basically almost public apathy? They cannot express themselves freely in the social media. They do not. The newspapers pretty much echo only what the government wants them to
Mm-hmm.
say.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no free press. People are afraid to say, demonstrate what it is. What is that is scaring the Turks as people? And historically speaking, they've been in the forefront of innovation, of progress, of advancement. What it is that are scaring them from going out in protesting en masse, to send a clear message that they will no longer sit down and accept the horrific treatment,
Yeah.
and the persecution that are suffering in the hands of this corrupt Erdogan regime.
So I have a lot to say about that. A lot in my chest, just want to spark up. So fear,
Please do so here.
yeah, I will. So yeah, I'm so sad. So of course, fear is something very important, very impactful here because they are just targeting people who post on social media. They arrest them. How come people, can afford their freedom? Or it's not easy. But when you put this aside, this the fear sense, still this lack of solidarity and unity is really concerning and saddening. It's not a new thing, it's always been there. But I don't know if you are familiar with the protest right after the arrest of İmamoğlu, the mayor of Istanbul.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I was so hopeful at that moment when I saw the young people outside there, they were fed up with the democratic backslide, their careers, their futures, their worlds, they were going away. So they were very powerful. But still, there is this, I want to say that this is a tribal approach. Everybody wants something for only their own tribes or their own sects. Seculars, conservatives, leftist, rightist, Kurdish, Turkish, conservative LGBTQ people. They are, I mean, not they, I want to include myself too. If I consider, if I, myself, my older self back in Turkey, restricted and, these comfort zones in these walls separating all these sects from each other, people are either not aware of others plights or they don't care. So when I want to do something in terms of gender equality and gender justice within the United Nations here with conferences or academic research, I'm trying to reach out to people back in Turkey, and I wanna mention some responses that I hear. The work that you are doing is very important, but you are somehow affiliated with the Gulen movement, so you are FETÖ, meaning that you are a member of this armed organization using
Mm-hmm.
the regime's discourse, Erdogan's discourse. There is this marginalization, stigmatization, or there is this, I don't know, competitive idea, because with these dismissals, hundreds, millions of these dismissals, other people will, they were replaced there. AKP supporters or other conservative people were brought into the positions that, of these dismissed. This is a good, opportunity, benefit. Or I don't know, if you want to ask me with whom I am with, angry with more, Erdogan or society, I would say society, because abiding by the oppressive regime is not humane, is not fair, is not dignified, Alon. I'm so disappointed by people. Yes, people can be, not aware, unaware of what's going on, but when you somehow happen to know what's going on, because we are living in a AI age, so it's not possible not to be aware of what's going on. Just being silent or fighting against injustices through only for your own sake, this is not okay. This is not
Yeah,
democracy.
what actually happened before Erdogan came to power. By and large, the military in Turkey has been sort of so-called the guardian of democracy of
Uh-huh.
Turkey. When any regime that deviated, for example, to move toward Islam, the
Uh-huh.
military intervened, and in fact, they have toppled the various two or three governments before, because the military was the guardian. They wanted to protect the democratic form of government until, of course, Erdogan came. What he's done, basically after he uh, he arrested. He
Mm-hmm.
wanted to control over the military. He's able to do so. He
Yeah.
basically arrested the high brass of the military, and he subordinated today. Today, the military in Turkey is
Mm-hmm.
subordinated to the political establishment, of course, led by Erdogan. So you don't have that guardrail that existed before Erdogan, which is the military that exists today. uh, what is the sense? And then you have, on the other hand, you have the public apathy to a great extent. You
Mm-hmm.
have no unity of purpose, no
Mm-hmm.
national unity of purpose. So now they're not gathering together and say, we have to only if we unite and if we present a united front, then we'll be able to we're able to deal with this regime. And that is not happening. So if you don't have no outside, NATO is not interfering, the military is incapable, basically, support of the government, and then you have a public apathy. Then what is going to change? Who is going to introduce such a change? I mean, the question today is, sooner or later, Erdogan cannot live forever. If for no other reason, there are natural reason, he's going to go. What do you see happening in the wake of the horrific disaster that he is going to leave in his wake? And there is no apparent successor, as I said earlier, from the
Mm-hmm.
AK party. And I think the next election is coming in about in a year, right? The presidential election.
Yeah, it's very close, but I
It's
don't know what's gonna
yeah,
happen.
it's fairly close. So where do you see that going, given that there is no one is basically challenging
Mm-hmm.
Erdogan today, not from within and not from without, where this is going to go?
Um, yeah, I want to keep the hopes up, if people are listening, because I don't want to cause any, depression in that sense. But people like us uh, are gonna be very impactful in this sense, because educating people, not only people in power in offices, but also ordinary citizens in the countries that these exile people are living, in European countries, in any countries here too. These reports, these numbers, and also maybe more importantly, life stories, true stories, are gonna draw attention in terms of taking action and making change. These people, us, living in free countries, reasonably, or, living in a safe and secure position right now, we are, I believe, responsible in that sense because, educating people, educating especially young people, not only in diaspora, but also back in Turkey too, through some online courses, through some webinars like that, in terms of the laws that are broken, international and global attention that is put on this situation. Even if they are not taking action, they are aware somehow. So
Yeah.
in that regard, educating these people and showing what others are experiencing, and others actually are not others. It is all, Erdogan in only in one, thing. Erdogan is very egalitarian. He's just putting every dissident into the same sack. He's not discriminating dissidents as Kurdish or Gulen or other. So just take him as an example and fight against this, atrocities and this, regime, this authoritarianism, unified. He's not discriminating dissidents, then come together. So in that sense, others are not others. We are all being persecuted, oppressed by the same regime. So come together. It can be through gender frame. It can be through, ethno-nationalism or Islamism frame. It doesn't matter. We can always find, common grounds. That's what we are trying to do as ASD and as an academic, independent academic myself. Just educating people, especially young people. For me, young people are very important. They are gonna go vote. They have to be aware what's going on. So I don't know if that may answer your question.
Well, I mean, of course, it is necessary, but I'm very aware, for example, about the various chapters of the Gulen movement here in the United States. They are trying to, of course, they are active all the time, trying to spread the word. They are talking, you're talking about educating the people. The question is, to what extent that is really reaching out to the people, to the young people in Turkey itself. I mean,
It
that
does.
is.
It actually does.
Yeah, but now I would like to ask you, how is it reaching out to them? I mean, I'm aware that they are listening, they're watching.
Yeah.
Do you see, however, I haven't been able to see a sort of a movement within galvanize in Turkey itself of young people are actually thinking in terms of where, because it's the effort to educate them has not as yet materialized to a quote unquote a kind of a
Yeah.
movement.
Yeah.
Why? What is going to take in order to translate this what you call education into an actual movement in
Yeah.
order to effect some change?
Yeah, but Alan, sometimes actions are not visible. If especially in such authoritarian regimes, sometimes instead of visible protest or visible movements outside on the streets, other tangible actions, which are so-called invisible actions, voting or mobilizing among themselves, being aware, these are also tangible actions when it comes to change the make social changes. For example, I am mentoring youth for the United Nations, panels or other, projects, social justice projects. It's including youth, not only from the United States, but also other places too. Not only me, other people are doing too. So I see that there is a huge and very, solid change, including those in Turkey, the youth. They are they have to take action, and political action actually for me is the most impactful and shortest action, because these young people are gonna vote, and also they are gonna come into impactful positions when they have their professions and careers. It's not something that will happen tomorrow or next year or in 5 years time. This will take time, Alden. Unfortunately, when you destroy the mechanisms, the state institutions, to that extent, just like in Turkey, it's not gonna change, all of a sudden. It will take a really long time.
Yeah, well, of course it's not going to change. I mean, we are obviously aware of the fact these things do take time. But let me, from my perspective, when I look at, you mentioned the United Nations, and I'm not sure how effective the United Nations has been or can be when it comes to these type of the behavior of these type of rogue countries like Turkey under Erdogan.
Yeah.
But you have significant constituency in Europe of Turkish citizens who live in Europe itself.
Mhm.
And I don't see, I've been looking into that to see, are they organized? Because in Europe, at a minimum, there's a democracy, functioning democracies. They'll be able to organize themselves, protest in
Mm.
Europe. I have not seen that taking place in Europe itself because Europe, as I said, Turkey is a NATO member state. Many of these European countries, most of them are NATO member states. Why aren't they Turks who are living in European community? And there's a significant number of them,
Yeah,
quite
yeah,
a
yeah.
bit, are not out and say, organize themselves and get the European community at least to listen to what is going on in Turkey itself. Why, from your perspective, that is not taking place either?
No, they do actually.
Well,
Every
I haven't seen much
No,
of
there
that
is this,
taking place.
and it's been going on maybe for 5, 6 years now, and they are going in front of the in Strasbourg. They are going there, and it was thousands of people coming from different European countries. Last time, if I'm not mistaken, it reached to about 1 million people coming from even UK, and some, UK parliamentarians. This Jeremy Corbyn was there too. There were other, impactful people join these people too. So they every year, not only that, but this is the biggest one. This is the most important one. They just, gather in front of this European court and in Strasbourg, and they raise awareness, they protest, they give concerts, and it's actually does a lot of noise in that sense. And when you see some tangible, rulings coming from European Court of Human Rights, Yalçınkaya and this December rulings, these are showing that they are not still enough, but somehow, step by step, with tiny baby steps, it
Well,
shows that they are aware.
well, my concern was actually, the size. It's not significant. I know there are million of them, but you don't see million or 100,000 out Turks in the street demonstrating. We don't see that happening. Again, I'm not putting a blame on anyone.
Oh
I'm
no,
just
you're right.
suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that is to effect a change in Turkey itself. Since you cannot organize yourself within Turkey, obviously, the only other opportunity is Europe, much more so than the United Nations. And I would have liked to see more Turks organize themselves and also more consistently, not sporadic demonstrations here and there. Has to be far more consistent, day in and day out, more or less, so to speak, in order to send a clear message to Erdogan and, of course, to the various government and European communities to say, we cannot, this cannot is no longer acceptable.
Yeah.
That's I mean, this is one one measure, one
Yeah, one
step,
way.
one way to should take a place.
We need to, I'm so
Can you
sorry.
identify other ways by which,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'd like to, I'd like
Yeah,
our
yeah, yeah.
listeners to hear from you. What
We did
other
a lot of
opportunities?
protests. We have been doing a lot of protests here too. But as you said, sometimes these collective actions don't take place in streets. For example, every year, 2 or 3 times in the United States, the representatives of Turkish diaspora, Turkish American diaspora here in the United States, go to Congress, Senate, and Human Rights Commissions to brief them about the latest, developments in terms of human rights abuses, but not only, their state representatives, especially as AST representatives, we are going to Tom Lance's Human Rights Commission representatives, or Helsinki Commission representatives, or what was the other one? Foreign Affairs Commission. And you know what? Actually, even if they are in very close contact with Turkey's government, these life stories, these numbers, these statistics can be overlooked or disregarded by them. Every year, twice or 3 times, putting everything in front of them and asking for accountability, there has been bills passed. and warning Erdogan in terms of its uh, democratic backsliding, or this F-16 the military warnings or some sanctions. That worked actually. On the other hand, when it comes to United Nations, for example, there are different entities: Child Rights Committee, CEDAW, Commission on the Discrimination, Violence Against Women. There has been really good and tangible developments, but we cannot talk about them because of the confidentiality. But there has been personal or group-based developments taking place in Turkey right now that happened.
Yeah, I mean, as we come very close to concluding this, and we can talk for hours about this. I just want to mention here whereas before Trump came to power, a little over a year ago, President Biden, Obama, before him, the Democrat, they were not happy with how Erdogan has been conducting himself. But of course, Trump see far more eye to eye with Erdogan than any of his predecessors, because they, in terms of the way Trump likes to govern, he sees that in Erdogan, he sees that in Putin. I mean, he attracted to authoritarian regimes, and he's very tolerant of what Erdogan is doing. So you don't have American pressure either on Erdogan at this particular juncture. Now, the election is coming soon. When the mayor of Turkey was trying to run, he was arrested, and I believe he's still in jail. Um, so right now, I just want to conclude. There's not going pressure from really coming from anywhere, but I agree with you. There is this internal, outside effort to educate, to promote, to talk about it. Um, but again, I'm just looking at the whole picture, and you don't want to convey pessimism, and I'd like not to convey pessimism. That's not my nature either. But I feel very difficult to be more optimistic about what's going to happen until and unless Erdogan depart the political scene, and hopefully some changes may well take place. Do you see such a prospect at all at any time in the near future?
As just you said, I don't want to be pessimistic. As a human rights advocate, to take action sustainably, we have to be optimistic. But as you said, it's not gonna happen, one night in one attempt. And also collective changes, I don't believe, will take place, in the very soon near future. It will take time, but one by one, reinstating the rule of law should be the first, prior target goal for us. So to reinstate it, as you mentioned, international organizations should be there, urge Turkey to take action. And it's even with tiny bit, baby steps, it's happening, to do some trade agreements or some military agreements. They are, urging Erdogan to make some changes in prisons, for example, prison conditions. So I want to say that, with unique and, tangible, solid actions, goals, targeting long-term, targeting short-term changes, we have to be strategic in planning, and I believe we are. So in terms of instead of being pessimistic, being strategic, tactical, and knowing where to go, when to go, with whom. This is very important. And as ASD, in collaboration with other organizations, I believe we are taking our actions in that regard, in that domain. But still, we need more noise. We need more solidarity. First of all, among the people of Turkey, and then with the collaboration of other, people from different backgrounds. Noise will bring attention, and attention will urge state leaders, world leaders, to urge Erdogan to make changes. So it's kind of a change. If you cannot achieve the last goal, without achieving the first, chain of these goals.
Yeah. The one thing, I didn't mention, you didn't mention, is that the weakness of the opposition parties in
Oh
Turkey.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And so here again, there is a weak opposition. They
Yeah.
have really never been able to make any significant dent politically in Turkey. And to this day, I feel that the leadership of the opposition parties
Yeah.
are not strong enough, visionary enough,
Because they
being
are in
able
jail, Alan.
to
They did
present
charge.
an aggressive agenda for the future.
Yeah.
And of course, they're tremendous. They're threatened
Yeah.
regularly about the regime. So you have this, all of this together. I think Erdogan is certainly taking full advantage of everything. Just to recap, apathy to a great extent, no opposition, no pressure from the outside, um, and um, and he's pretty much given a free rein to do the damage that he's doing. And all we can hope
Mm-hmm.
is like you said, uh, taking those incremental steps,
Yeah.
educating, and eventually, hopefully, this will lead to some change. Final word on your part, and we can conclude with that.
First of all, again, I want to thank you for this, opportunity, this platform, and I just want to call on all the people of Turkey. This, regardless of their beliefs, their ethnicities, just coming together is very important to fight against this, regime, Erdogan, not Turkey. We are not talking about our country. We are talking about Erdogan or the regime itself. So coming together, fighting against these fragmentations, these divisions, it's only us who can overcome this, oppression.
Okay, well, we have to leave it at that good word from you. Again, Hafza, thank you so much for taking the time. And I hope we'll have another opportunity sometime in the near future to explore further
Yeah,
what happened, what might happen in Turkey. Thank
thank
you
you.
again, Hafsa. Look forward to seeing you
Yeah,
again in the very near future.
see
All the
you.
best to you. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this episode on the issues. You can find this podcast on my SoundCloud page, and stay tuned to my social media accounts for the latest analysis and announcements.